by Robert E. Howard. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. The People of the Black Circle. Chapter 1. Death Strikes a King. The king of Vendhya was dying. Through the hot, stifling night, the temple gongs boomed and the conchs roared. Their clamor was a faint echo in the gold-domed chamber where Bunda Chand struggled on the velvet-cushioned dais. Beads of sweat glistened on his dark skin. His fingers twisted the gold-worked fabric beneath him. He was young. No spear had touched him. No poison lurked in his wine. But his veins stood out like blue cords on his temples, and his eyes dilated with the nearness of death. Trembling slave girls knelt at the foot of the dais, and leaning down to him, watching him with passionate intensity, was his sister, the Divi Yasmina. With her was the Wazam, a noble grown old in the royal court. She threw up her head in a gusty gesture of wrath and despair as the thunder of the distant drums reached her ears. "The priests and their clamor," she exclaimed. "They are no wiser than the leeches who are helpless. Nay, he dies, and none can say why. He is dying now, and I stand here helpless, who would burn the whole city and spill the blood of thousands to save him. Not a man of Ayodhya but would die in his place, if it might be, Divi," answered the Wazam. "This poison—" "I tell you, it is not poison," she cried. "Since his birth, he has been guarded so closely that the cleverest poisoners of the East could not reach him. 5 skulls bleaching on the Tower of the Kites can testify to attempts which were made, and which failed. As you well know, there are 10 men and 10 women whose sole duty is to taste his food and wine, and 50 armed warriors guard his chamber as they guard it now. No, it was not poison. It is sorcery. Black, ghastly magic." She ceased as the king spoke. His livid lips did not move, and there was no recognition in his glassy eyes. But his voice rose in an eerie call, indistinct and far away, as if called to her from beyond vast, wind-blown gulfs. "Yasmina, Yasmina, my sister, where are you? I cannot find you. All is darkness and the roaring of great winds." "Brother," cried Yasmina, catching his limp hand in a convulsive grasp, "I am here. Do you not know me?" Her voice died at the utter vacancy of his face. A low, confused moan waned from his mouth. The slave girls at the foot of the dais whimpered with fear, and Yasmina beat her breast in anguish. In another part of the city, a man stood in a latticed balcony overlooking a long street in which torches tossed luridly, smokily revealing upturned dark faces and the whites of gleaming eyes. A long-drawn wailing rose from the multitude. The man shrugged his broad shoulders and turned back into the arabesque chamber. He was a tall man, compactly built and richly clad. "The king is not yet dead, but the dirge is sounded," he said to another man who sat cross-legged on a mat in a corner. This man was clad in a brown camel-hair robe and sandals, and a green turban was on his head. His expression was tranquil, his gaze impersonal. "The people know he will never see another dawn," this man answered. The first speaker favored him with a long, searching stare. "What I cannot understand," he said, "is why I have had to wait so long for your masters to strike. If they have slain the king now, why could they not have slain him months ago?" "Even the arts you call sorcery are governed by cosmic laws," answered the man in the green turban. "The stars direct these actions, as in other affairs. Not even my masters can alter the stars. Not until the heavens were in the proper order could they perform this necromancy." With a long, stained fingernail, he mapped the constellations on the marble-tiled floor. The slant of the moon presaged evil for the king of Vendia. The stars are in turmoil, the serpent in the house of the elephant. During such juxtaposition, the invisible guardians are removed from the spirit of Bunda Chand. A path is opened in the unseen realms, and once a point of contact was established, mighty powers were put in play along that path. Point of contact? Inquired the other. Do you mean that lock of Bunda Chan's hair? Yes. All discarded portions of the human body still remain part of it, attached to it by intangible connections. The priests of Ashura have a dim inkling of this truth, and so all nail trimmings, hair, and other waste products of the persons of the royal family are carefully reduced to ashes, and the ashes hidden. But at the urgent entreaty of the princes of Kosala, who loved Bunda Chand vainly, he gave her a lock of his long black hair as a token of remembrance. When my masters decided upon his doom, the lock, in its golden, jewel-encrusted case, was stolen from under her pillow while she slept, and another substituted, so like the first that she never knew the difference. Then the genuine lock traveled by camel caravan up the long, long road to Peshkari, thence up the Zyber Pass, until it reached the hands of those for whom it was intended. Only a lock of hair, murmured the nobleman, by which a soul is drawn from its body and across gulfs of echoing space, returned the man on the mat. The nobleman studied him curiously. I do not know if you are a man or a demon, Khemsa, he said at last. Few of us are what we seem. I, whom the Kshatriyas know as Karam Shah, prince from Iranistan, am no greater a masquerader than most men. They are all traitors in one way or another, and half of them know not whom they serve. There, at least, I have no doubts, for I serve King Yezdegerd of Turan. And I, the Black Seers of Yimsha, said Khemsa, and my masters are greater than yours, for they have accomplished by their arts what Yezdegerd could not with 100,000 swords. Outside, the moan of the tortured thousands shuddered up to the stars, which crusted the sweating Vendian night, and the conchs bellowed like oxen in pain. In the gardens of the palace, the torches glinted on polished helmets and curved swords and gold-chased corselets. All the noble-born fighting men of Ayodhya were gathered in the great palace or about it, and at each broad arched gate and door 50 archers stood on guard, with bows in their hands. But death stalked through the royal palace, and none could stay its ghostly tread. On the dais under the golden dome, the king cried out again, racked by awful paroxysms. Again his voice came faintly and far away, and again the Devi bent to him, trembling with a fear that was darker than the terror of death. Yasmina! Again that far, weirdly dreamy cry from realms immeasurable. Aid me! I am far from my mortal house. Wizards have drawn my soul through the wind-blown darkness. They seek to snap the silver cord that binds me to my dying body. They cluster around me. Their hands are taloned. Their eyes are red, like flame burning in darkness. Save me, my sister. Their fingers sear me like fire. They would slay my body and damn my soul. What is this they bring before me? At the terror in his hopeless cry, Yasmina screamed uncontrollably and threw herself bodily upon him in the abandon of her anguish. She was torn by a terrible convulsion. A foam flew from his contorted lips, and his writhing fingers left their marks on the girl's shoulders. But the glassy blankness passed from his eyes like smoke blown from a fire, and he looked up at his sister with recognition. Brother, she sobbed. Brother, it's you. and his weakening voice was rational. "I know now what brings me to the pyre. I have been on a far journey, and I understand. I have been ensorcelled by the wizards of the Hymelians. They drew my soul out of my body and far away into a stone room. There, they strove to break the silver cord of life and thrust my soul into the body of a foul night-weird their sorcery summoned up from hell. Ah, I feel their pull upon me now. Your cry and the grip of your fingers brought me back, but I am going fast. My soul clings to my body, but its hold weakens. Quick, kill me, before they can trap my soul forever." "I cannot," she wailed, smiting her naked breasts. "Swiftly, I command you." There was the old imperious note in his failing whisper. "You have never disobeyed me. Obey my last command. Send my soul clean to Ashura. Haste, lest you damn me to spend eternity as a filthy gaunt of darkness. Strike, I command you, strike." Sobbing wildly, Yasmina plucked a jeweled dagger from her girdle and plunged it to the hilt in his breast. He stiffened and then went limp, a grim smile curving his dead lips. Yasmina hurled herself face down on the rush-covered floor, beating the reeds with her clenched hands. Outside, the gongs and conchs brayed and thundered, and the priests gashed themselves with copper knives. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, Of the People of the Black Circle, by Robert E. Howard. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The People of the Black Circle, Chapter 2, A Barbarian from the Hills. Chunder Shan, governor of Peshkari, laid down his golden pen and carefully scanned that which he had written on parchment that bore his official seal. He had ruled Peshkari for so long only because he weighed his every word, spoken or written. Danger breeds caution, and only a wary man lives long in that wild country where the hot Vendian plains meet the crags of the Hymelians. An hour's ride westward or northward, and one crossed the border and was among the hills where men live by the law of the night. The governor was alone in his chamber, seated at his ornately carven table of inlaid ebony. Through the wide window, open for the coolness, he could see a square of the blue Hymelian night, dotted with great white stars. An adjacent parapet was a shadowy line, and further quenelles and embrasures were barely hinted at in the dim starlight. The governor's fortress was strong, and situated outside the walls of the city it guarded. The breeze that stirred the tapestries on the wall brought faint noises from the streets of Peshkari, occasional snatches of wailing song or the thrum of a cithern. The governor read what he had written slowly, with his open hand shading his eyes from the bronze butter lamp, his lips moving. Absently, as he read, he heard the drum of horses' hoofs outside the barbican, the sharp staccato of the guard's challenge. He did not heed, intent upon his letter. It was addressed to the Wazam of Vendia, at the royal court of Ayodhya, and it stated, after the customary salutations, "Let it be known to your excellency that I have faithfully carried out your excellency's instructions. The 7 tribesmen are well guarded in their prison, and I have repeatedly sent word into the hills that their chief come in person to bargain for their release. But he has made no move, except to send word that unless they are free, he will burn Peshkari, and cover his saddle with my hide, begging your excellency's indulgence. This he is quite capable of attempting, and I have tripled the numbers of lance guards. The man is not a native of Gulistan. I cannot with certainty predict his next move, but since it is the wish of the Divai—" He was out of his ivory chair and on his feet facing the arched door, all in one instant. He snatched at the curved sword lying in its ornate scabbard on the table, and then checked the movement. It was a woman who had entered unannounced. a woman whose gossamer robes did not conceal the rich garments beneath them any more than they concealed the suppleness and beauty of her tall, slender figure. A filmy veil fell below her breasts, supported by a flowing headdress bound about with a triple gold braid and adorned with a golden crescent. Her dark eyes regarded the astonished governor over the veil, and then, with an imperious gesture of her white hand, she uncovered her face. "Diva!" The governor dropped to his knees before her, surprise and confusion somewhat spoiling the stateliness of his obeisance. With a gesture, she motioned him to rise, and he hastened to lead her to the ivory chair, all the while bowing level with his girdle. But his first words were of reproof. "Your Majesty, this was most unwise. The border is unsettled. Raids from the hills are incessant. You came with a large attendance?" "An ample retinue followed me to Peshkari," she answered. "I lodged my people there and came on to the fort with my maid Gitara." Chunder Shan groaned in horror. "Devi, you do not understand the peril. An hour's ride from this spot, the hills swarm with barbarians who make a profession of murder and rapine. Women have been stolen and men stabbed between the fort and the city. Peshkari is not like your southern provinces. But I am here and unharmed," she interrupted with a trace of impatience. "I showed my signet ring to the guard at the gate and to the one outside your door, and they admitted me unannounced, not knowing me, but supposing me to be a secret courier from Ayodhya. Let us not now waste time. You have received no word from the chief of the barbarians?" "None save threats and curses, Devi. He is wary and suspicious. He deems it a trap, and perhaps he is not to be blamed. The Kshatriyas have not always kept their promises to the hill people." "He must be brought to terms," broke in Yasmina, the knuckles of her clenched hand showing white. "I do not understand." The governor shook his head. "When I chanced to capture these 7 hillmen, I reported their capture to the Wazam, as is the custom. And then, before I could hang them, there came an order to hold them and communicate with their chief. This I did, but the man holds aloof, as I have said. These men are of the tribe of Yakuris, but he is a foreigner from the west, and he is called Conan. I have threatened to hang them tomorrow at dawn if he does not come." "Good," exclaimed the Devi. "You have done well, and I will tell you why I have given these orders. My brother—" She faltered, choking, and the governor bowed his head, with the customary gesture of respect for a departed sovereign. "The king of India was destroyed by magic," she said at last. "I have devoted my life to the destruction of his murderers. As he died, he gave me a clue, and I have followed it. I have read the Book of Skylos and talked with nameless hermits in the caves below Gilai. I learned how and by whom he was destroyed. His enemies were the black Seers of Mount Yimsha." "Ashura!" whispered Chunder Shan, paling. Her ice knifed through him. "Do you fear them?" "Who does not, your majesty?" he replied. "They are black devils, haunting the uninhabited hills beyond the Zybar. But the sages say they seldom interfere in the lives of mortal men." "Why they slew my brother, I do not know," she answered. "But I have sworn on the altar of Ashura to destroy them. And I need the aid of a man beyond the border. The Kshatriya army, unaided, would never reach Yimsha." "Aye," muttered Chunder Shan. "You speak the truth there. It would be fight every step of the way, with hairy hillmen hurling down boulders from every height, and rushing us with their long knives in every valley. The Turanians fought their way through the Hymelians once, but how many returned to Khorasun? Few of those who escaped the swords of the Kshatriyas, after the king, your brother, defeated their host on the Jomda River, ever saw Sakundaram again." "And so I must control men across the border," she said. men who know the way to Mount Yimsha. But the tribes fear the Black Seers and shun the unholy mountain, broke in the governor. Does the chief Conan fear them? She asked. Well, as to that, muttered the governor, I doubt if there is anything that devil fears. So I have been told. Therefore, he is the man I must deal with. He wishes the release of his 7 men. Very well. Their ransom shall be the heads of the Black Seers. Her voice thrummed with hate as she uttered the last words, and her hands clenched at her sides. She looked an image of incarnate passion as she stood there with her head thrown high and her bosom heaving. Again the governor knelt, for part of his wisdom was the knowledge that a woman in such an emotional tempest is as perilous as a blind cobra to any about her. "It shall be as you wish, your majesty." Then, as she presented a calmer aspect, he rose and ventured to drop a word of warning. "I cannot predict what the chief Conan's action will be. The tribesmen are always turbulent, and I have reason to believe that emissaries from the Turanians are stirring them up to raid our borders. As your majesty knows, the Turanians have established themselves in Secunderam and other northern cities, though the hill tribes remain unconquered. King Yezdegerd has long looked southward with greedy lust, and perhaps is seeking to gain by treachery what he could not win by force of arms. I have thought that Conan might well be one of his spies." "We shall see," she answered. "If he loves his followers, he will be at the gates at dawn to parley. I shall spend the nights in the fortress. I came in disguise to Peshkari and lodged my retinue at an inn instead of the palace. Besides my people, only yourself knows of my presence here." "I shall escort you to your quarters, your majesty," said the governor, and as they emerged from the doorway, he beckoned the warrior on guard there, and the man fell in behind them, spear held at salute. The maid waited, veiled like her mistress, outside the door, and the group traversed a wide, winding corridor, lighted by smoky torches, and reached the quarters reserved for visiting nobles, generals and viceroys mostly. None of the royal family had ever honored the fortress before. Chunder Shan had a perturbed feeling that the suite was not suitable to such an exalted personage as the Devi, and though she sought to make him feel at ease in her presence, he was glad when she dismissed him and he bowed himself out. All the menials of the fort had been summoned to serve his royal guest, though he did not divulge her identity, and he stationed a squad of spearmen before her doors, among them the warrior who had guarded his own chamber. In his preoccupation, he forgot to replace the man. The governor had not been gone long from her when Yasmina suddenly remembered something else which she had wished to discuss with him, but had forgotten until that moment. It concerned the past actions of one Kerim Shah, a nobleman from Iranistan, who had dwelt for a while in Peshkari before coming on to the court at Ayodhya. A vague suspicion concerning the man had been stirred by a glimpse of him in Peshkari that night. He wondered if he had followed her from Ayodhya. Being a truly remarkable Devi, she did not summon the governor to her again, hurried out into the corridor alone, and hastened toward his chamber. Chunder Shan, entering his chamber, closed the door and went to his table. There he took the letter he had been writing and tore it to bits. Scarcely had he finished when he heard something drop softly onto the parapet adjacent to the window. He looked up to see a figure loom briefly against the stars, and then a man dropped lightly into the room. The light glinted on a long sheen of steel in his hand. "Shh," he warned. "Don't make a noise, or I'll send the devil a henchman." The governor checked his motion toward the sword on the table. He was within reach of the yard-long Zabar knife that glittered in the intruder's fist, and he knew the desperate quickness of a hillman. The invader was a tall man, at once strong and supple. He dressed like a hillman, but his dark features and blazing blue eyes did not match his garb. Chunder Shan had never seen a man like him. He was not an Easterner, but some barbarian from the West. But his aspect was as untamed and formidable as any of the hairy tribesmen who haunt the hills of Gulistan. "You come like a thief in the night," commented the governor, recovering some of his composure, although he remembered that there was no guard within call. Still, the hillman could not know that. "I climbed the bastion," snarled the intruder. "A guard thrust his head over the battlement in time for me to rap it with my knife hilt." "You are Conan? Who else? You sent word into the hills that you wish for me to come and parley with you. Well, by Crom, I've come. Keep away from that table, or I'll gut you." "I merely wish to seat myself," answered the governor, carefully sinking into the ivory chair, which he wheeled away from the table. Conan moved restlessly before him, glancing suspiciously at the door, thumbing the razor edge of his 3-foot knife. He did not walk like an Afghuli, and was bluntly direct where the East is subtle. "You have 7 of my men," he said abruptly. "You refused the ransom I offered. What the devil do you want?" "Let us discuss terms," answered Chunder Shan cautiously. "Terms?" There was a timbre of dangerous anger in his voice. "What do you mean? Haven't I offered you gold?" Chunder Shan laughed. "Gold? There is more gold in Peshkari than you ever saw." "You're a liar," retorted Conan. "I have seen the suck of the goldsmiths in Khorasun." "Well, more than an Afghuli ever saw," amended Chunder Shan. "But it is but a drop of all the treasure of Vendya. Why should we desire gold? It would be more to our advantage to hang these 7 thieves." Conan ripped out a sulphurous oath, and the long blade quivered in his grip as the muscles rose in ridges on his brown arm. "I'll split your head like a ripe melon." A wild blue flame flickered in the hillman's eyes, but Chunder Shan shrugged his shoulders, though keeping an eye on the keen steel. "You can kill me easily, and probably escape over the wall afterward. But that would not save the 7 tribesmen. My men would surely hang them, and these men are headmen among the Afghulis." "I know it," snarled Conan. "The tribe is baying like wolves at my heels because I have not procured their release. Tell me in plain words what you want, because, by Crom, if there's no other way, I'll raise a horde and lead it to the very gates of Peshkari." Looking at the man as he stood squarely, knife in fist and eyes glaring, Chunder Shan did not doubt that he was capable of it. The governor did not believe any hill horde could take Peshkari, but he did not wish a devastated countryside. "There is a mission you must perform," he said, choosing his words with as much care as if they had been razors. Conan sprung back, wheeling to face the door at the same instant, lips a-snarl. His barbarian ears had caught the quick tread of soft slippers outside the door. The next instant, the door was thrown open, and a slim, silk-robed form entered hastily, pulling the door shut, then stopping short at the sight of the hillman. Chunder Shan sprang up, his heart jumping into his mouth. "Devi!" he cried involuntarily, losing his head momentarily in his fright. Devi! It was like an explosive echo from the hillman's lips. Chunder Shan saw recognition and intent when up in the fierce blue eyes. The governor shouted desperately and caught at his sword. The hillman moved with the devastating speed of a hurricane. He sprang, knocked the governor sprawling with a savage blow of his knife hilt, swept up the astounded Devi in one brawny arm, and leapt for the window. Chunder Shan, struggling frantically to his feet, saw the man poise an instant on the sill in a flutter of silken skirts and white limbs that was his royal captive, and heard his fierce, exultant snarl, "Now dare to hang my men!" And then Conan leapt to the parapet and was gone. a wild scream floated back to the governor's ears. "Guard! Guard!" screamed the governor, struggling up and running drunkenly to the door. He tore it open and reeled into the hall. His shouts re-echoed along the corridors, and warriors came running, gaping to see the governor holding his broken head, from which the blood streamed. "Turn out the Lancers!" he roared. "There has been an abduction!" Even in his frenzy, he had enough sense left to withhold the full truth. He stopped short as he heard a sudden drum of hoofs outside, a frantic scream, and a wild yell of barbaric exultation. Followed by the bewildered guardsmen, the governor raced for the stair. In the courtyard of the fort, a force of lancers stood by saddled steeds, ready to ride at an instant's notice. Chunder Shan led his squadron flying after the fugitive, though his head swam, so he had to hold with both hands to the saddle. He did not divulge the identity of the victim, but said merely that the noblewoman who had been born the royal signet ring had been carried away by the chief of the Afghulis. The abductor was out of sight and hearing, but they knew the path he would strike, the road that runs straight to the mouth of the Zybar. There was no moon. Peasant huts rose dimly in the starlight. Behind them fell away the grim bastion of the fort and the towers of Peshkari. Ahead of them loomed the black hills of the Hymelians. End of Chapter 2.